Now, as I sort of mentioned, in early society, in early man, this was a really simple code of practice. There was nothing written down. There was no formal agreement. They didn't communicate about it, they didn't talk about it. It was a natural evolutionary process. Hunter and hunter on their own, they soon died out if they didn't work together. People who refused to be part of society died out. And so this idea of watch each other's backs, it wasn't anything written, it was just a natural process for survival. And as man's technological and sociological abilities advance, the need to make this more and more complex, this idea of a way of binding to the other society. Things like laws covering the division of labour, as I was mentioning, you know, I work in computers, somebody else works in art, somebody else works as a teacher, somebody else as a doctor. Things like, and that's comparable to early man, you know, who hunted the prey, who cooked it, who made the tools. And this system of social evolution has continued over the generation in the present day. From the small hunting parties we saw in early man, farming communities, places like ancient Mesopotamia, where there was maybe 50 people living together, and that was society. Then you go to the tribal settlements, some of which you still see today. Nomadic countries in places like North Africa, places in the Middle to Far East, they still have this idea of a tribe, where it's a relatively small group of people, maybe a couple of hundred, maybe 1,000 people, a really small society. Then you can go sort of further on into the era of nationalisation, where races of people came together. People who lived in the same area, like British people got all together and formed Britain. The Gallic people got to do Gaul, France. And that carried on further into this idea of empire, you know, the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. Societies were always getting bigger, so the rules were getting more and more complex. And then today we live in a global community where pretty much everyone is all part of the same world community. And that's where it gets really complicated, because you're governing all sorts of people who all have their own different social orders. They all come from different societies within a society. So really, in conclusion, every aspect of our social order, what we experience today in terms of society and how we live, has evolved by a process of natural selection. What has happened best for humans to survive is to form society. It has many advantages in terms of our survival, as I've already discussed today, in terms of strength, which we find within our social groups, not just physical strength, but an emotional strength, a sense of well-being. We fit within our society, whether that be small friendship groups, the housemates you live with, whether it be, say, the university community, the people you share a course with, for example, or today, the wider university community coming together and discussing things openly without sort of chaos. There's order to it. And then when we progress, we go into a professional life, which is a new society itself, with its own system of government, its own sort of social law, that has all evolved to benefit that society as a whole. And ultimately we go on to humanity as a whole. We are a species that works best in groups and societies. And I hope today that I've sort of discussed that the evolution by natural selection and this idea of altruism, this idea of doing something else for somebody else at cost to yourself, are basically the same thing. They're part of the same idea of society and social evolution. And perhaps my initial question is, it survival of the fittest or survival of the nicest? And my opinion is, and the conclusion that I drew from the research I did, was that they're probably the same. That the nicest people are the ones that survive, the ones who work best within society are the fittest. They are the ones who procreate, they are the ones who continue the species. I'm happy to take any questions because there's plenty of tea and coffee available. I hope this will raise some ideas. Well, I mean, it's fairly obvious in most species today. I mean, pack animals have social order. I mean, the best example I can think of, and one I did some research into, was dolphin society. I mean, they're a relatively intelligent species. If you break a law in dolphin society, you're rejected from society, and the dolphins soon die. on their own that work best as a society, and they have law and order, they have punishments for abuse and assault and for eating too much fish. Any other ideas, thoughts? I'll say help yourself to tea and coffee. Cheers, thank you.